A rural Tennessee county pastor of age 83 stole $300,000 in funds intended for food bank donation and charity for his own personal use, his own car, and for prostitution. He's the pastor of a place called Liberty Baptist Church in Sumner County and stole over $300,000 in charitable funds between 2020 and 2022. He had even $100,000 of hidden cash straight up in his home. And this is how the guy looks. I'll mute the video. You don't need to hear him say the same. But here what he is in former footage before he was convicted and arrested, doing a walkthrough of the donation place and trying to be a icon in the community. But we all know that with power comes obvious places to be corrupt, and here is one as well. I do think, though, it is a timeless tale, unfortunately, how often you see pastors who are local leaders in communities being corrupt, and they go without question for their corruption, and so it leads them to do horrendous things like steal $300,000 funds. And this isn't some super large, bustling town or city. This isn't some really huge place with thousands and millions of dollars to spend. $300,000 for a local place in a small county in Tennessee would probably go a long way and probably means a lot. And it sounds like them taking back the funds and were able to earn most of it was actually pretty important for them. Now, if we look here, though, it looks like I found the church's website and looks, very patriotic with the 240 pixel JPEG of the flag here. A gander. You can see then in their staff, they have had a new pastor since 2022, Jerry Filler Bowley. Here it is, Willoughby. So looks like, they have their own backflow, so to speak, because this happened in 2022 when he was arrested. It sounds like he was finally justice served, I suppose, but long over. And one of the unfortunate things that I can empathize with is I did see this news originally from the our atheist subreddit, but if you take a look here, this top comment is something that I felt similarly, in that I'm honestly just relieved it wasn't related to sex trafficking and because more often than not, you see people in power in the Catholic Church, in any sort of Christian church, any and every religious institution, using it for sexual favor of children, exploitation of children is absolutely abhorrent. But the hypocrisy and the power of leadership within these people is something that without discrimination, without any sort of checks and balances, just unilaterally be able to do what they will. So it makes me wonder, what were the processes in place that allowed him to smuggle funds away in such a large amount over to did he just run the whole bank account in addition to running the food drive himself too? Whatever this was. He's sentenced for 12 years in prison, which I think, frankly, is probably for the amount of money and the fact that he did prostitute well, and purchased his own personal goods too. He wasn't like using the money to put in some other parts of the church or some other parts of the food bank. No, he was using it to buy his own car. And of course, pay for sexual favors, as was written here. I don't know why they don't just say prostitution. I suppose maybe that's like a libel thing that journalists have to do. But let's take a look here. We see that sexual services, rejected food bank funds for unrelated accounts he controlled, and then extensive purchases across many cards, issuing checks to himself and others as well. And then let's see, what was a personal car? It's not even a cool car. Like, if you're gonna steal a car, okay, and be an asshole, at least buy like a cool race car. You know what I mean? At least get something cool. But nope, it was a 2018 Chevy Silverado for personal use. So there is no limit to the bad taste and bad moral and ethical. But something which is weird and unique from a philosophical perspective within the Christian psyche is that this could all be moral. there's a possibility, like how God commanded God commanded Abraham to kill his one and only son Isaac, or in any other situation you'd find this precarious and absolutely absurd. If it's a divine revelation from God, then it is forgiven and it actually is moral. And so this is a conundrum, I think, morality and Christianity. I talked about this in my most recent video, replying to ex-atheist replies to me, kind of double barreling there. It's already on my Patreon. If you're a subscribing member, you can view it now. Otherwise, it will be out in the next week or so. Point is this: things are moral in the Christian theological worldview because God says they're moral. That's it. That's their objective morality. Thing is, historically, morality from God has changed even within their own books of the Bible, right? God has allowed slavery in some instances, Old Testament of the Bible, yet says in other parts of the Bible that, you couldn't own anybody or something like that. But the whole point is that there is no consistency with morality in religion. There's only power. There is only power. So this person, this 83-year-old sleazebag, used the power from charities. Imagine the funds going to people who are hungry and couldn't afford their own meals, but instead they're going to 2018 Chevy Silverado. Disappointing. I'm even more disappointed too because I think let's do some journalistic investigation. Maybe he's trying to hide it, I suppose, because why then, if you're doing this between 2020 to 2022, when you're hiding the funds, you buy a 2018 Chevy Silverado. Does that mean it's used or it's just been on the lot for a couple years? Why not buy a car for that year if you're stealing all this money? Maybe to come out as not suspicious. There's a bit more on the details. Let's take a look. Announced. Okay. So in January 2022, Gill announced the closure, citing health concerns. In response, the Church of Hendersonville formed a new nonprofit, Feed Sumner Food Bank and Ministry, to continue county. Equipment and vehicles were sold to support its launch. However, church leaders soon discovered that although over $300,000 had been deposited from asset sales, only $28,000 remained SSCFB's bank account. So I suppose that's where it was figured out. You could be a bit clever too. It sounds like from a buyout, from a closure, that's where it was all figured out. I guess if you're running, though, a public organization, you know that the finances are going to be looked at. Whoever runs the organization, you should be a bit more clever with how you stuff the money. I suppose that James Gill was not clever enough to get that. They reviewed the bank records and report findings by law enforcement. They got a search warrant for residence. So it took all of this, and this man, who has a really endearing face now, 83, he's going to be in jail until age 95 or death, whichever comes first. Really endearing face. Was able to get away with this for 2 years. And actually, perhaps then, it sounds like if he had continued to run SCFB, the food bank, until his death, so to speak, or if he had someone else to run it and not close it and have someone form a new nonprofit from it, right? If he had just maintained control of the nonprofit for the rest of his life, then he may have never been found out. No one may have ever looked through all of the money and the assets that should have been in the account, the nonprofit, and found that they weren't there. It's possible that he could have continued to get away with this. And so that's the scariest thing. Just because of all of the power and the ability you have to go unchecked, do whatever you like, then you can just continuously get away over. Sad part is, as I speak, I'm sure there are tons of cases of embezzlement, of money laundering, of theft, of pedophilia, of all of these terrible things being done by people in positions of power, more so people of religious power. This is where there is the big distinction, I think, between religious power and just regular old power, political power. that's hard to divorce in the case of people like pastors. And I think with the Trump administration too, part of you see his appeal to the Catholic far right. Right, there's been pushes from Trump to allow Catholic priests to not have to give up pedophiles, right? If they're told in the confessional that heinous crime of that level. And he's appealing to far right Christian extremists because he knows that he can, because there's a devotional aspect to religious power not present in typical power. Because in typical power, you can be an authoritarian, try and stop all means of information. You know that there's almost a liberating effect being so authoritative that when you're not under the gaze of your authoritative dictator, when you're in the comfort of your own room and you can hide away from that lens, you can know in your mind that that person is a dictator. But when it comes to a religious authoritarian, you can't. You can't run. You have to accept because you believe in the core of your soul, that this person is right. This person is a voice of God, or they are God, depending on your religion. This gets more insane with Mormonism. I've been Mormonism is the theme for the last month or so. I just been obsessed with all of these crazy Exmos, and I will put a reference to a channel here on some interesting propaganda Mormon videos that are being gone through. But fact is, you can basically give people life advice that is more than life advice, but what you're bid to do, what you must, that's baked into doctrine. You must get married, otherwise you do not get to go to heaven, to the highest level of heaven. All of these crazy things, but side tangent. I don't want to do a Mormonism video out of this. I want to talk about the implicit abuse of power from Christian pastors. This comes over and over and over. So there's a great site, Joe My God. You guys should all check it out. That does this more. They do basically articles on every time there's a incident like this. I say incident, but really, it's just more and more examples of when people religious power taking advantage. So maybe I'll do a video on each time there's a news about this, but it's just terrible, absolutely terrible. He has other related stuff as well, just regular news, but a lot of critical secular perspective. So high recommendation is so. Hey, subscribe to me too. I'll try to deliver interesting content, and on Patreon as well if you'd like to support me financially there. And I hope you can get some interest out of these two references with Joe My God and Alyssa as well, the other great channel that talks about the creation church. We're also forming a community on Discord that is growing more and more. It's actually surprising. There's more Christians than atheists on the server now. So if you want to have engaging conversations or challenge people or be challenged, then feel free to go to the section to argue and discuss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.